Welcome to the site of St.Raphael's. It's a name that, if you pronounce it correctly as St.Raphael, you're pronouncing it wrong. My name is David Anderson. I volunteer with the local Glengarry Historical Society, and it's my pleasant task today to introduce you to the history of this great ruin of St.Raphael's. This is an address from 1999 delivered at the commemoration of the ruins of St.Raphael's through Canada's Historic Sites and Monuments Board, making us an official National Historic Site. It's entitled St.Raphael's Church, the Cradle of Catholicism in Ontario, written by myself, David Anderson, and Bernie MacCulloch from Glen. We stand today at the site of the Cradle of Catholicism in Ontario. There are earlier sites. St. Marie among the Hurons, where the blood of the martyrs of 1649 stained the earth. And there was also the old French mission of Assomption at Sandwich. St. Andrew's West on the Raisin River holds priority of settlement by 2 years and has the oldest church building in Ontario. St. Raphael's and St. Andrew's became parishes on the same day in 1802. But it is not age or priority that we observe today. Rather, we are here at the ruins of St. Raphael's Church to commemorate and celebrate the importance of this church in the history of our province and our people. In 1826, a high-level accord between Lord Bathurst, the colonial secretary, and Pope Leo XI elevated Alexander MacDonnell to titular Bishop of Regiopolis, or Kingston. This church and school in the wilderness was not only the administrative center of the first Catholic diocese in Ontario, but was in fact for a time the administrative center of the first diocese of the Church of Rome to be erected in the far-flung reaches of the British Empire since Henry VIII established the Reformation in England. The heavy gold episcopal ring presented by George IV to Bishop MacDonnell was later, in 1890, presented to the third Alexander MacDonnell, first bishop of the new Diocese of Alexandria, and is in the safekeeping of the Bishop of Alexandria, Cornwall, to this day. That this should come to pass is grounded in the record of loyalty of the Highland Scots Catholics to the House of Hanover in their support of the ideals of the British Empire. In this sense, it is still fair to say that it was the Scots who put the great in Great Britain. Through the course of the 7-Year War in America and the taking of New France, their valor was legendary. From the Plains of Abraham to the Revolution in America, from which Providence saw fit to people our country, and from Vinegar Hill in the Irish Rebellion of 1798 to Queenston Heights and Lundy's Lane in the War of 1812, the Glengarry Regiment fought shoulder to shoulder and then returned to the green hills of Glengarry. Let us not mistakenly soften our claim. For 5 years, St. Raphael's, under Bishop MacDonnell, was the administrative center of the first Catholic diocese in the British Empire since the Reformation. From empire to hamlet, let us return to the beginning. When the first Father Alexander MacDonnell, Scotus, led his 560 parishioners from Knoydart in the rough bounds of western Inverness-shire to St.Raphael's in 1786, they were not alone. Further to the west, along the great natural Esker Ridge, an old Indian trail that connected them to St. Andrew's West, the loyalist Catholic families of the disbanded King's Royal Regiment of New York had been settled 2 years earlier along the Raisin River, some 8 miles north of the Catholic Church at St. Regis, Quebec. The first place of worship at St. Raphael's was a log building situated northeast of the present ruins and affectionately known as the Blue Chapel. Some founding families of the new settlement included early Clandonald families, such as the Bankers, the Potashes, Balavians, Sandfields, Greenfields, the Captains, the Big Duncans, Sandy John Allens, Kenneth Angus Reynolds, Ranald Rorys, Angus Bands, McIndooey, McKeesick, and Angus Taylors, not to omit the many others such as Angus the widow Huey Rory Taylor. Nick's names in Glengarry were a necessity and not always flattering. At one time, from Glenroy to the Chapel Side Road, there were 5 Angus MacDonalds: Angus Schenectady, Angus Danny Alec, Angus the Farmer, Angus Big Angus, and Angus the Chunk, a mailman's nightmare. The families were descended from the old Highland lines of Greenfield, Aberhalder, Coolachy, Leek, Loop McAllisters, Garinish, Lundy, Ardnabee, Inchlegan, Sandegg, Scotus, and Crowland. Also, other families are represented by names such as McDougall, Macmillan, Kennedy. Indeed, some of the ancestors of the current pastor and vicar general of the diocese, Monsignor Donald Bernard McDougall, are buried here. With the loss of Bonnie Prince Charlie's cause in the fields of Culloden, the loyalty of the Jacobite clansmen turned to the House of Hanover. By the time of the Revolution in America 30 years later, Bishop MacDonnell could well declare that through the war, the Catholic Highlanders had remained loyal to a man. Here on the parade grounds in front of the church, where we stand, and directly east of us, the future bishop was declared chaplain of the 2nd Glengarry Fencibles for the War of 1812. At the taking of Ogdensburg, under Colonel Red George MacDonnell, in the good company of the Protestant chaplain, the Reverend John Bethune of Williamstown, the bishop was heard to order that cowards and laggards would suffer excommunication. It would appear that the warning was sufficient. The bishop had always declared that any young gentleman bearing the name MacDonnell would either be a priest or a warrior. The old military parade ground, where in 1812 the last of the fiery cross in the Highland world was seen, where the Glengarry militia departed for the uprisings of 1837 and 38 in Lower Canada, was taken into as part of the graveyard in 1890 to the great regret of the old parishioners of the time. During Father Duncan Campbell's 1901 celebration of the completion of the church interior, a 100-year-old member of the congregation, Mrs. Donald MacDonald, of 28 on the 5th of Lochiel, was said to have recalled from her childhood the Mass for the fallen men of Queenston Heights. She remembered particularly the great grief of the bishop in announcing the terrible news of the death of the dashing young Glengarry hero, Lieutenant Colonel John Greenfield MacDonnell, Attorney General for Upper Canada and Brock's aide-de-camp. He lies at rest in the Brock Monument with his general, far from the rest of the family, here on the green slopes of St. Raphael's. At the request of the bishop, his name John was given to a newborn boy of the parish, the future Premier of Ontario, John Sandfield MacDonald. In Stan Rogers' ballad, Macdonnell on the Heights, he says, "Not one in 10,000 knows his name," a sentiment which in Glengarry could well be turned to say, "Not one in 10,000 will forget his name." The Battle of Waterloo in 1815 eliminated the threat of the little tyrant Napoleon. The British Empire and her people assumed first place among the nations of the world. The tried and true loyalty of the men of the first Glengarry Fencibles in the Irish Rebellion of 1798, and the towering inspiration of Macdonnell, the warrior priest, in the War of 1812, were undoubtedly factors in favor of the start of the quarrying for the Church of St.Raphael's that winter. By sleighs in the winter and stone boats in the summer, the cut rock was taken from Lot 8 on the 8th concession of the Potash McDonald's, and to the west of the church, the farm now owned by Marc Brunet. Father Alec requested of his Montreal correspondent, the Reverend Candide Michel Lesaulnier, plans for a church seating 1,000 persons to replace their first church of worship known as the Blue Chapel. The church was to see 2,000 persons gather in 1837 in the worst snowstorm of the winter to observe the 50th anniversary of the bishop's ordination to the priesthood. The mason contractor was none other than the bishop's cousin, Archibald Fraser, who was bought out from Edinburgh and whose reputation was later secured by many important large public buildings in Ontario and Quebec. Locally, in addition to St. Raphael's, he was architect for some additions to Colonel Alexander Fraser's estate at nearby Fraserfield. The original account ledgers, we note the disbursement of funds for cut stone to Buchanan Macmillan, incidentally, the nephew to the famous King's printer in London of the same name. In 1821, money was sent to Montreal for a cross and a weathercock for the bell tower, the remains of which are on display elsewhere. In July 1816, a payment for 2,732 bushels of lime for the church was made to one Chisholm and John MacDonald of Lot 11 on the 1st of Kenyon at the north end of Brennahown. In a letter to Rome written upon completion of the church, Bishop Macdonnell states that his is a church without equal in North America. On his 1840 final voyage to Ireland and Scotland at the age of 80, the bishop was obliged to ride outside the stagecoach in the rain and passed away days later at Dumfries of pneumonia. 20 years later, at the solemn ceremonial return of the bishop's body from Scotland, en route to Kingston, 3,000 came to honor his memory. It is remembered that in lifting the casket, a handle broke off and released the sweet smell of heather. Late in the century, the annual feast of Mount Carmel, known locally as the scapular devotion, would have as many as 2,700 communicants, and the parish was, according to an 1835 census, the largest in Ontario at 6,000 worshippers. The intent of our commemoration is clear. The plaque reads, "The Cradle of Catholicism in Ontario, and for a time the largest and most important parish." To this we may add a not insignificant flourish, that here in St. Raphael's was founded the first institution of higher learning in Ontario. In the matter of plaques, the plaque erected now at the ruin reads, "The ruins were left standing after the fire of 1970 to serve as a testament." It is a testament of place. The Lord loves small places, be it a stable in Bethlehem or a hillside hamlet here in Glengarry. It is a testament of faith, the faith of a congregation which changed the course of the empire. It is a testament of stone walls, walls that speak in their silence, walls that from now shall never fall. It is a testament of light, the light of learning, the light of the past on the present. It is a testament of a people that came as the thistle of Scotland, have been graced by the fleur-de-lis of neighboring Quebec, and in turn by the welcome arrival of Dutch and other Europeans. Truly, we are now all come under the maple leaf. There is a verse in Jeremiah which tells of the leaving of the children of Israel. It could well be the story of St. Raphael's settlers who departed their Highland glens only 40 years after the defeat of the clans by the swords and muskets at the Battle of Culloden. The verse reads, "And those that are left of the sword shall find grace in the wilderness, and their nobles shall be of themselves, and their governor shall rise up from the midst of them. And ye shall be my people, and I shall be your God." On this historic spot, we look out on Dundas Street, the old King's Road, the stagecoach highway connecting the two Canadas. Here on the hills of St. Raphael's, Bishop MacDonnell and his congregation might well have dreamt of a great city. In its place, this church and school in the wilderness gave our nation not a great city, but a great people.